previous chapters, in Perek Yud Aleph, the Alter Rebbe describes the two levels of tzaddik and the two levels of Rasha. In Perek Yud Beis, we get down to the main character, or the main theme of the Tanya, the benoni, for whom the Tanya was written. Perek Yud Beis. This is on page 32. The number at the bottom of the page is 48. The benoni who, now the benoni who is neither a tzaddik nor a rasha, who shel ein hara gever kol kach, is the person in whom the evil, the Yetzer Hara, is never so strong, to capture or take control of the city, meaning the body. Lihislabish beguf, to be able to clothe itself in the body and to use the body. To sin, which means either in thought, speech, and deed, lahachtiye, to cause the body to do any hainu sheshleisha levushi nefesh abahamis, any one of the three garments of the animal soul, shemachshava dibur u'maisa shemitzad klipa, the thought, speech, and deed of the animal soul are all by nature involved with klipa. So ein gevrim be'al nefesh olikis, these garments are never stronger than the godly soul's garments, lihislabish beguf b'meyach u'b'peh u'b'shara machivorim lachtiya molatamim chas v'shalom. The three garments of the animal soul, which means the expression of the animal soul, is never stronger than the expression of the godly soul. And since the expression of both souls demands the use of the body, expression of the soul means thought, speech, and deed, and you can only think by using the brain, speak by using the mouth, and do by using the hands or the feet, so that the godly soul's garments and the animal soul's garments are both trying to control the body. And in the benoni, the animal soul's garments are never stronger than the godly soul's garments, and therefore the godly soul has exclusive control of the body, of the behavior of the person, and the animal soul's garments have no body with which to sin. Rak shleisha levushe nefesh olikis heim levadam mislapshim beguf. Only the garments of the godly soul, they alone invest the body, shehe machshava dibur u'maisa sharir. And the garments of the godly soul are thought, speech, and deed of Torah and mitzvahs. So the benoni is in his behavior, in the garments of his soul, perfect, because the godly soul overwhelms the animal soul in its garments. Whereas in the tzaddik, the godly soul overwhelms the animal soul even in its inner character, in its intellect, and in its emotion. So that's why he's a tzaddik. Also, the benoni is not a rasha, because in the rasha, the animal soul sometimes, or often, depending on the level of the rasha, the animal soul does have access to the body, and therefore can think, speak, or do what isn't permissible. That's why he's a rasha. And a benoni is not someone who hasn't sinned lately, but did sin in the past, and that's why he's not a tzaddik. So the Alter Rebbe emphasizes, he never sinned, and he will never sin, because it is that causes one to be a benoni rather than a tzaddik. So the benoni is someone who does not have any sin on his record. He has no sin, and he will not sin. A benoni is not less than a tzaddik because he is about to sin. A benoni is not a potential rasha. So why then is he not a tzaddik? So of all the possibilities, the Alter Rebbe eliminates them all. He is a benoni and not a tzaddik, not because he once sinned, or he has a sin to his record, because even if he had sinned, he's already done a tshuva that has removed the sin completely and is no longer on his record. So it's not the sin that makes him less than the tzaddik, not the sin of the past. The other possibility is that he's a benoni and not a tzaddik because he's about to sin. He's disposed to sin. He's available to sin, even though he has not yet sinned. So the Alter Rebbe says that's not the case either. A benoni will not sin. He is not disposed to sinning in actual behavior, in thought, speech, or deed. And the title Rasha cannot be applied to him, not even for a moment, all his life. So, even in the slightest sense, he cannot be called a Rasha, and not even for the slightest moment, all of his life. Why then is he not a tzaddik? Achmuhus v'atzmus, nefesh olikis, but the body of the godly soul, meaning to say the inner powers of the godly soul, shehein eser b'chinei seha, which are the 10 powers of the soul, loy lohen levadon hamlucha v'hamemshala bi'iktana. When it comes to the powers of the soul, rather than the behavior of the soul, when it comes to the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul, here the godly soul does not have absolute control over the body. Only at times, like during the davening, during the reading of the Shema, the benoni actually overwhelms the midas of the animal soul and the intellect of the animal soul, to where even the inner powers of the animal soul are subdued by the goodness, by the godliness. But other than those occasions, the godly soul does not have power over the animal soul's inner powers. So that although the godly soul has complete dominion over the animal soul's garments, over its thought, speech, and deed, and that's why the benoni's behavior is impeccable. But when it comes to what the animal soul desires or loves, what the animal soul understands, what makes sense to it, or what doesn't make sense to it, here the animal soul has not been changed, has not been overwhelmed by the godly soul. The animal soul still feels what it feels and knows what it knows. And what it knows is that the physical is real and godliness is mysterious. And what it feels is that the physical is pleasurable and godliness is distant, unnatural. So except for those times, during the reading of the Shema and the davening, shehi shas meichen de gadlus l'mayla, which is an auspicious time above, when godliness is more available, the gam lemata hi shas hakesha l'chol adam, and below also, in other words, from the human beings considering the davener's condition, it is also a more auspicious time, she'oz mekasher Chabad shalei Hashem, because during the davening and the Shema, he is tuned into godliness, because his mind is attached to godliness, where he is dwelling, thinking deeply about God's greatness. So he's involved and immersed in godliness. And he is working at arousing his love for God, that it should burn in the right side of the heart, like a flame. To want to cleave to God through doing mitzvahs and studying Torah, and he does this out of love. Why does it lead to love? This awareness of God and this thinking about God leads to love of God, because that's the subject that he is dwelling on in the Shema and in the bracha that comes before and after the Shema, which all speaks about loving God and serving him out of love. And it's only then that harasha b'chol hasmoli kafuf u'batul l'teiv, that the evil in the left side of the heart is overwhelmed by the good, hamispashet b'chol hayimoni mechabad shebemeich, by the good that overflows from the right side of the heart, that is aroused by the understanding, the Chachma bin Das, which is in the mind, HaMekusharim B'Gdulas Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which at this moment are bound and tied to godliness, because he's dwelling on that subject. But after the davening, when he is removed from the concentration on God's greatness, now the evil reawakens and returns in the left side of the heart, and once again desires the pleasures of this world, so that essentially the animal soul has not been transformed or changed, and even during the davening it didn't leave, it didn't go away, it wasn't destroyed, it was merely like as if it were asleep, and immediately after the davening it reawakens. But other than these occasions, where for the moment, the emotions of the animal soul are overwhelmed by the emotions of the godly soul, other than on these occasions, the animal soul's emotions are not affected within the benoni. The animal soul's emotions are what an animal soul's emotions by nature tend to be, and that is the desire for physical worldly pleasures. And here you notice that the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that the good is misgaber al hara. It says that the ra shebechol asmoli is kofaf ubotel l'toiv, but not that the toiv is misgaber, because as we said earlier, when the godly soul succeeds in doing mitzvahs, it doesn't destroy the animal soul, because it is not contrary to the essence of the animal soul to be doing mitzvahs. And so it is overwhelmed in that it doesn't express itself, but it is not overwhelmed in its essence, because essentially Torah and mitzvahs do not contradict the animal soul. In the Hayom Yom, for the 14th of Teves, the Rebbe writes that the Shpoler Zayde, who was this disciple of the Mezritcher Magid, was a man, the Shpoler Zayde was a man of intense fervor, more so than any of his colleagues, the Magid's other Talmidim. When he visited the Alter Rebbe in Ladi, it was in 1809 or 1810, he told the Alter Rebbe that when he was a child of 3, he saw the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov placed his holy hand on my heart, and ever since I have had a warm heart. A gesture of a tzaddik, certainly seeing him and hearing his voice, is meant to make an impression, is supposed to be experienced in such a way that it leaves an impression that is never forgotten.